Walter Harrington lifted his glass like he was offering a blessing. His smile was the kind that looked friendly until you noticed it never reached his eyes. To Riley, he announced, voice smooth as polished stone, "May she finally have what she's always lacked, a stable family." He paused, letting the words settle. Then he added, softer but sharper, "Something her sister could never provide." 200 guests laughed on cue. Too loud, too quick. The way people laugh when they're relieved the cruelty isn't aimed at them. I didn't laugh. My name is Clarinda Peton, and the man turning my sister into a punchline had no idea the ground beneath him was already failing. For 20 years, I've carried two things: the silence of a mine that swallowed my parents, and the proof of who saved money by cutting the supports. Tonight wasn't about embarrassment. Tonight was about collapse. The Aspen ballroom glittered under a vaulted glass ceiling. Chandeliers scattering light like ice shards across white tablecloths. Beyond the windows, mountains rose under snow so pristine it looked untouched by time. Inside, the air tasted like money. Wine and orchids and expensive perfume layered over secrets older than anyone cared to remember. Across the room, Riley sat in a gown white enough to make her look like a promise someone hadn't broken yet. Her smile held, but barely. I saw the tremor in it. The way her fingers gripped the table's edge like she was bracing for impact. Walter stood at the head table, completely at ease. People like him always are. They believe rooms belong to them before they enter. I rose slowly. Chairs shifted. Crystals stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-breath. "Mr. Harrington," I said, keeping my voice level, "do you know what stability actually costs?" He blinked once, the smallest fracture in his confidence. Then the smirk returned. "Ah, the sister." I didn't look at him. I looked at Riley instead. Her eyes were wide with fear of the family she was marrying into, and fear of what I might do. Next, I sat back down. Hands steady. Heart louder than it should have been. Walter's phone vibrated inside his jacket. He checked the screen, and for the first time all evening, his expression wasn't entertainment. Denver Daily Investigations. Harrington mining case reopened. My smile didn't widen. It hardened, like concrete finding its final shape. I was 17 when the world caved in. Sirens tore through the winter dark. Floodlights turned the mine entrance into a wound carved out of the mountain's side. Men shouted into radios. Ambulance doors slammed shut like punctuation. Someone vomited into the snow near the barricade. I stood behind a chain-link fence so cold my palms stuck to the metal when I grabbed it. They kept saying no one was still inside. But I knew my parents. Word. My father's lunch pail was still in the truck. My mother's scarf hung on the hook by the door at home. You don't forget details like that. You don't forget because your mind keeps circling back, trying to rebuild a moment that cannot be rebuilt. Near the pit, a worker's voice cut through the chaos. The supports weren't reinforced. Another voice answered, harder. "Shut up. Cameras are already here." By morning, the official story ran in thick black ink across the front page. Natural quake causes tragic collapse. A clean headline. An easy ending. A lie designed to settle the dust before anyone could sift through it. 3 days later, I walked into Harrington Mining's administrative office. I carried the newspaper folded under my arm and grief boiling so hot behind my ribs. I thought my chest might crack. A man behind the front desk didn't bother looking up. Family already got paid out. "Move along, kid." I moved, straight past him to the paperwork stacked beside his elbow. And there it was, a project memo. Ink almost faded, like it was never meant to survive long enough to be read twice. Approved. Material cost reduction. Signed, W. Harrington. That was the day I stopped believing in accidents. Life became fragments after that. Construction sites at dawn. Night classes under fluorescent lights. Cheap apartments with walls thin enough to hear neighbors arguing about bills. Rice and canned vegetables for dinner because groceries cost less than grief. Riley fell asleep most nights to the sound of my textbooks turning dot by day. I learned how buildings stand, load paths, safety factors, stress distribution dot by night. I learned how people collapse when the wrong supports get removed. I raised Riley with one rule. We survive. I never told her what I'd found in that office. Not because I'd forgiven it. Because I knew the truth would steal something from her childhood that she didn't deserve to lose. On my desk, a photo of our parents sat in a simple wooden frame. Some nights, the lamplight caught the glass and made it look like fire trapped behind the image. I'd whisper to them when the apartment went quiet. If he built his empire by removing supports, I'll be the engineer who proves it. Years later, my phone buzzed with Riley's name glowing on the screen. Claire. Derek proposed. You're going to love his family. My hand went cold against the glass. I knew that name. Harrington. She was marrying the son of the man who signed off on the cuts that killed our parents. And Riley had no idea she was walking into the same mine, just dressed in silk instead of coal dust. The Harrington estate looked like it belonged in a magazine. Glass walls catching afternoon light. Vineyard rows stitched across distant hills. A driveway long enough to make visitors feel small before they ever reached the door. Walter Harrington sat at the center of it all like a king, settled into an upholstered throne. He held his wine glass the way certain men hold gavels, loosely, but with the full expectation of obedience. He studied me with polite contempt. Civil engineer. Is it? I nodded. His smile spread slowly. So you build things that eventually fail. I met his gaze. Only when someone removes the supports. His expression tightened, almost invisible. Almost. Behind him hung a framed family portrait. Walter, his wife, Derek, and in the background, the same mountain ridge where the mine had collapsed. He'd placed it there deliberately. A trophy, a warning. Dinner unfolded with conversation that sounded polished but cut like filed edges. When it ended, I stepped outside into the cold. Derek followed. Please don't judge him too harshly, he said quietly. He's difficult, but he's done good things too. I watched my breath cloud the air. Have you ever been underground, Derek? Where beams matter more than speeches? He didn't answer. I left him standing in the light spilling from the house, stretched across the snow like a fracture widening. Back home, my apartment stopped being a living space and became something closer to a war room. I pulled project archives, cross-referenced inspection histories, matched dates against invoices and reinforcement schedules. Then I found a file buried deeper than the others. Rocky Ridge Extension Site Report. New location. Same signatures. The blueprint glowed on my screen while the city outside slept. Load-bearing columns under specification. Reinforcement skipped. Safety margins shaved thin as paper. And again, at the bottom of the approval chain, W. Harrington. I forwarded everything to Marcus Lennox, an investigative journalist who'd tried digging into Harrington mining years earlier before legal threats silenced him. His reply came within the hour. If this holds up, it isn't negligence. It's trading bodies for profit. His next message arrived near dawn. Follow the money. That afternoon, Riley called. Her voice sounded scraped raw. Why are reporters asking questions about Derek's family? Did you talk to someone? My chest tightened. Riley, you're trying to ruin him. Her words fractured. This is my life, Claire. I'm not ruining anyone, I said carefully. I'm refusing to let another accident get written into a headline. She hung up. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt excavated, like something essential had been carved away. Lennox emailed again that night. $3.2 million, transferred from an environmental safety fund, routed through offshore shells, cleaned and buried. I stared at the number until my vision blurred. My parents didn't die because of a quake. They died for $3.2 million and one man's signature. Near midnight, an envelope appeared beneath my door. Inside was a printed map of an active mining site. Red circles marked zones labeled unstable. At the bottom, a single handwritten line. He's doing it again. A whistleblower. Someone inside the machine had finally cracked. I didn't sleep. I sketched my own version of the map instead. Stress points. Failure lines. Weak joints waiting to give dot in the margin. I wrote one name like a fracture spreading through ink. W.H. A week before the wedding, Riley stood in front of a mirror, turning slowly in her gown while bridesmaids praised the beadwork. Derek watched her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. My phone buzzed. SEC confirms formal investigation. Linoxy exhaled once, slow and controlled. Right on schedule. That evening, Derek came to me alone. If you know something about my father, he said quietly, tell me now. I studied his face. Would you still marry into this family if you knew their wealth was built on the dead? His throat moved like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. And for the first time, I understood. He wasn't Walter. He was just someone raised under the same roof, trained never to ask where the foundations came from. The next morning, Lennox called. His voice was tight. Claire Walter knows someone's moving against him. He's making calls. Good, I said. Let him feel the ground shift. An hour later, a message arrived from an anonymous number. He's laundering money through Riley's name. My stomach dropped. Riley wasn't just marrying into the Harringtons. She was being used. A clean signature. An innocent stamp to legitimize dirty transfers. That night, I wrote in my notebook, if I stop, he wins. If I continue, she gets hurt. Justice always breaks something. I texted Lennox the final instruction. Wedding day. 1:45. When he raises his glass. 3 days before the ceremony. I drove outside Denver and stood at the abandoned mine entrance where everything began. Rust bled down sagging metal beams. The air smelled like wet stone and grief too old to name. My fingers traced in. Engraving half erased by weather. Safety first. I laughed. Once. Quietly. Without any humor at all. You couldn't even follow your own words. I whispered. Not when it mattered. The night before the wedding, I sent Walter a gift. A sleek silver frame holding a photograph of the old mine entrance. Elegant. Innocent dash-looking dot, but beneath the print, embedded in the frame's backing, was a data chip. Offshore transfers. Forged authorization trails. Evidence arranged with an engineer's precision. On the frame's back, I'd engraved one line. Foundations don't lie. Walter summoned me to a downtown cafe that evening. He didn't bother with pleasantries. You think documents scare me? He leaned forward. I bury people with documents. I didn't flinch. Not this time. His eyes narrowed. When a foundation fails, everything above it collapses. Then, like a blade sliding gently into place, he added, even your sister. He left first. I stayed, staring at my untouched coffee while wind pushed grit across the doorway. The sound reminded me of rock shifting before a cave-in. Lennox called later. Urgent. Someone leaked part of the timeline. Another outlet's about to publish early. My pulse stayed even. Then we moved the release forward. To when? I checked the ceremony schedule. Checked the program. Heel toast at 1:45. We drop everything at 1:44. Silence. Then Lennox exhaled. You're sure? I'm sure. Near midnight, Riley knocked on my door. She stood in her robe, eyes swollen with exhaustion. Tell me this is a misunderstanding. She whispered. Walter's panicking. Derek's scared. It isn't a misunderstanding. I said gently. And tomorrow isn't about hate. Then what is it about? Truth, I answered. And what it costs to finally tell it. She stared at me like she was looking at a stranger wearing my face. Then she turned and walked back to her room. Hours later, Derek found a folder hidden in Walter's private study. Forged signatures. His name and Riley's authorizing transfers neither of them had ever approved. He came to my door, pale as snow. He used us, he said. Both of us. I nodded. Stay quiet tomorrow. Let the evidence speak. When he left, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. 17-year-old me was still there somewhere, hands pressed against cold chain link, waiting for someone to walk out of the dark. Tomorrow, I whispered, the ground falls for the last time. Before dawn, a note slipped beneath my door. Riley's handwriting. Whatever happens tomorrow, please don't forget I love you. I folded it carefully, placed it in my coat pocket. I didn't cry. Not yet. The ballroom looked flawless in winter daylight. Glass and marble and sunlight pouring through the ceiling like absolution. Guests murmured. Cameras flashed. A string quartet played something cheerful enough to mask bad intentions. I sat still. My champagne untouched .140- for my phone buzzed. Files live. Lennox and 40-5. Walter rose. Straightened his tie. Lifted his wine. To Riley and Derek, he announced, smiling for the cameras. May your marriage stand stronger than certain. Foundations we've all seen crumble. Laughter. Rippled. Automatic. Obedient. Riley's shoulders locked tight. I stood. You love talking about foundations, I said, voice carrying across the room. So answer this: what happens when someone removes the supports and calls it business? Walter's smirk resurfaced. An engineer's lecture at a wedding? How charming. I set my glass down. Not hard, just final. You built your empire on hollow ground, I said. And today, everyone's going to see exactly what's underneath. His phone buzzed. His face changed. Behind him, the wedding screens flickered. First the photo slideshow, then headlines bleeding across the display. Like a storm overtaking sunlight, Harrington mining under federal investigation. Offshore transfers exposed. Forged signatures in CEO's family accounts. Safety violations linked to multiple deaths. Derek stood so fast his chair crashed backward. You used my name. He shouted at Walter. You used Riley's. Riley's hand flew to her mouth. Her breath broke into a sob as realization struck her like falling debris. Walter said nothing. For the first time in his life, charm failed him completely. I stepped closer. My voice dropped because truth doesn't need volume. My parents died because you wanted to save money, I said. Because you treated human lives like optional reinforcement. Then I turned to Riley. Come with me, I said softly. You don't have to stand on his lies anymore. Riley looked at Derek. Derek reached for her hand. Together, they walked out. The room didn't know whether to follow, stare, or pretend nothing was happening. Walter's glass tipped from his fingers. Red wine spilled across white linen like a confession no one could take back. Cameras clicked. By morning, those images would be everywhere. Rain threaded down my apartment window that night, smearing the city lights into watercolor. The television murmured, until the anchor said the name I'd been waiting to. Here, Walter Harrington has been detained by federal authorities, SEC, FBI, multiple warrants, accounts frozen, properties seized. I turned it off. On my desk lay my father's old drafting pencil, worn smooth from decades of honest work. They finally saw it. I whispered, what you tried to warn them about. The door swung open hard. Riley stood there, face swollen from crying, fury and grief braided together in her expression. You humiliated us, she said. You destroyed my husband's family. I kept my voice steady. No, I stopped pretending your future was safe when it wasn't. She threw a newspaper onto the table. Walter in handcuffs, jaw clenched, eyes still trying to project superiority. You could have told me sooner, she said. Would you have believed me? We stared at each other, and in that silence lived everything the years I raised her, the lies we swallowed to survive, and the unbearable truth that love doesn't protect anyone from consequences. My phone rang. Lennox. It's finished. The victim's trust is being reinstated. Assets rerouted to a new rebuilding fund. Your name's on it, Claire. I closed my eyes. Then the ground finally holds. Later that night, Riley texted, I understand now. You didn't destroy us. You gave us something real to stand on for the first time in 20 years. My smile felt like it belonged to me. Not sharp, not defensive. Just real. 1 year later, the old mine site looked nothing like a wound anymore. Wild grass grew where rubble once collected. A stone path led to a marble monument rising from the earth. The Peton Memorial Trust, built from truth. I knelt and placed white lilies at its base. Wind moved through the valley, soft as a held breath. The air smelled like damp earth, new earth. The kind that comes after rain has washed everything clean. I pulled my father's drafting pencil from my pocket and scratched a small line beneath the inscription, "Built to last." Footsteps approached. Lennox stopped at a respectful distance. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. I looked at the monument, looked at the mountains beyond. "No," I said. "You can't rebuild without removing what's rotten first." He handed me an envelope. Riley asked me to deliver this. Inside was a letter in Riley's handwriting, steady now, like someone who had finally stopped shaking. "We're naming our daughter Clara. I want her to grow up knowing what a real foundation looks like." My throat tightened. I folded the letter and pressed it against my palm. "Then she'll stand on something solid," I whispered. I walked away as sunrise spilled gold across the peaks, melting the last thin patches of snow from the ridgeline. People would call what I did revenge. But revenge is loud and hungry and never satisfied. This was quieter than that. This was restoration.